We're going to continue working on the melon basket. I've already done the God's eye, and now we're getting ready to insert the ribs, which are what these are called. It's just the pieces of number 6 round, and that I have cut into 12.5 and 11-inch pieces. You can see some are a little bit smaller. Now I'm doing a pumpkin basket, that's why they are green. Typically they will just be the natural color. So when I went to sharpen the ends, of course, the color is gone. And that's okay because most of them will be hidden behind the green God's eye that I've done for this basket. You're gonna be working with the 12.5-inch pieces first. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna put 3 on each side. So I've got my, get the ribs out here. So I want to make sure I have it so that where I did it for number 4 is facing down. This both sides, you can see both sides has number 4 coming down. They're both at the same spot. And what I'm going to do is on 1/2 from the side of the basket to the bottom, here to here, I'm going to insert right behind the point, right here in the God's eye. I'm just going to insert. I'm not going to stick it the whole way through just yet. I'm going to insert them into 2 parts, the 2 sections there of the God's eye. I'm just going to kind of place them in there for now. You can always readjust when you see how the pieces are, because even though I measure them the same, when I sharpen them, sometimes they change sizes. And as I look at mine, I can see that this one pops out a little bit more. So since the span from the God's eye in the middle is a little bit longer, I might switch those 2 out and put this one in between and get them to be more of the same. You want them to kind of be like they fall in a row with the two handle pieces here. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell. That middle one is still a little bit bigger, and that's okay. But what I can do is I can start to work on pushing it in a little bit more into that center spot, making these on the other side a little bit looser. And if it's even a little bit wider, it will pull in a little bit as we go to weave. So I'm going to do that to both sides. Now, as you're weaving these, they will probably pop out. You have to put them back in. Just something you have to deal with. It's not you just have to be patient and just handle it. So I'm going to put these other 3 in to the other side. And I can tell that one's already way bigger. So I'm going to put that one in the middle. Put it in as far as I can. Doesn't want to go in that center one very well. Might because I didn't sharpen it real well. Got a really long point on it, which might have something to do with it. So there, that's not too bad. So I've got my pieces. I'm going to try to space them so they're fairly evenly apart. And you want to make sure that when you are done, that you have the ribs. So here's my handle, and my ribs are below the handle on both sides. You want to make sure you have that when you're done. And this is the reason why you want to have your long pieces to continue weaving. This is called a continual weave. The other ones that I've shown you so far have all been start and stops, where you go around, you finish 4 over, you cut it, and you start another row. This is called a continual weave. And normally I ask you to find the right side of the reed and have that facing outside the basket. But because of this being continual, we're going to constantly be flipping the reed. So one side's going to be good side, one's going to be the bad side. Because it's a thinner reed, typically that you do a continual weave with, or a round reed, it's not going to have as much of the phrase and stuff that you're doing. So basically what you're going to do, and since this is a long piece, it's going to be a bit of a pain to start with, but it is worth it in the end to have the long piece. You're going to, and I take my things like this and I grab between with my fingers. You're going to pull this the whole way through. You're going to bring it as close to the God's eye as you can. I'm going to be working this around here. So I kind of go over, under, and pull it through. Make sure it doesn't twist. And you're going to go as close. This one you're going to go past the God's eye where it overlaps back in here, because otherwise it will not go all the way to the God's eye here. So it's okay to come back on top of what you overlapped there, or what you wrapped on there. Over, under, pull it through. Over, under, pull it through. Now, when you get to this point, you're going to bring it over the rim. Make sure it's up against it. The God's eye as close as you can get it. Come over the rim. And then you're going to start to go the opposite direction. So here's where the continual weave is. Work with your spokes, your ribs, your ribs. over, under, pull it through, push it against that other row, and again, get it as close to the God's eye as you can. Over, under, and you can see that this one here is starting to go a little bit smaller. Push it over as far as you can get it, okay? And so I'm working, and you want to bring them back and forth as you work them. So over and under, bring it all the way through, push it over, separate them a little bit if you need to, over, under, and like I said, if they pop out, just push them back in. It's going to be the other end more than likely that pops out. Bring it through, push it against what you've already done. That'll also help to space your ribs. Sometimes you have to separate them just to get them to move. All right. So I've gotten back to that one. I'm going to bring it over the top and bring it around, bring it under. And I'm going to continue going over, under. And you definitely want to pull after every under. So over, under, you can do it 2 at a time. It seems like a slow process, but it's much easier than some people take the ends and try to weave it. If that works better for you, go ahead. I find this works for me. I can get my fingers in there and it just makes it go a little bit faster for me. Over, under. Now typically it'll tell you how many to do before you insert your secondary ribs, which are the 11-inch ones that I showed you. You just keep on going. I'm just going to look real quickly to remind me. It's been a while since I've made this basket. 4 rows. All right, so over, under, and over. Okay. Oh, see, it popped out. I'm just going to very simply put it back in again and try to work it. Sometimes they're a little bowed even when you first do them. So I've got my 4 inches and my 4 rows, I'm sorry. So one's right against it, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can just kind of count them back and forth on the ribs here. Get them as close as you can. If they're not all the way, it's okay. It's not a big deal. And typically what I would do is go back to the other side and go ahead and get that God's eye, weaving in the end of that God's eye. But what I want to do is I'm going to show you what you do with the other ribs. So I'm just going to hold this here for right now. Just get out of my way. And my 4 ribs here that are a little bit shorter, what they're going to do is they're going to come in between these 2. And you're going to go underneath. Sometimes you can't go quite underneath. That one might show a little bit, but that's okay. I usually skip the first one. Let me go here. So go into the second one, you can go under. Push it in as far as you can get it. It might be a little round, so it hides. And put it between the God's eye on the other side, okay? And I put that in too far. And so what you want to do is kind of look to make sure that the ribs are going to be about the same, that one is not way, way, way bigger than the other. And again, this one is, okay? And then you put the other one in between those 2 on the other side. And you do that to both sides of your basket. So I would put my other 2 in here also. I'm not going to do that now because I'm going to do the 4 rows first. And then what you do is using those, you have those, now you have 5 ribs in there. So further, a little bit harder to get them together and get your fingers in there, but then you continue to weave in all of them now. So over, under, you can separate them with your fingers. I want to show you what to do if you run out of yarn, out of reed to join it. Come around, and I turn my basket so I'm going in the same direction each time. So I'm working easier for me. So you're going to include, and I wouldn't have included this. I do have to include those. So I would have continued to include those ones that are on here. Okay. All right, so there's those ones. Now, when I do the other side, well, I can go ahead and put those ones in. So I will insert these underneath there. Go to the other side. And normally there are pieces in there that you have to fight with a little bit, but I haven't done on the other side, so I'll come back and do that a little bit later in between the two. Oops. Now, do you see how it came through the God's eye? You want to try to avoid that if possible. Sometimes you have to lift up the piece that it's trying to go under and not have it show. And sometimes it shows. It's, you know, you can always cut it off later if you need to. Not a big deal. So then when I come back to this side, now I've got my 5. Spread them apart a little bit. Over, under, and this is where I need to work my ribs a little bit. It's a little trickier because I don't have the other side done yet. I just wanted to show you what happens. Over, under, and what with this basket, you really want to work your sides evenly. So you would do, you know, 4 rows on one side, 4 on another, and then you could do 6 or 8 or whatever you want to do on one side, and then go back and do the other side. It just helps keep the basket balanced. You can always smush it out later, but it does help keep the spokes where they need to be. And you want to pull these a little bit so there's not such a huge gap between those last 2 ribs and the bottom of the basket. And you can see I'm popping them in as they come out, which they will. Put them real close to the one before so you can see it's going to be a little wider towards the middle than it is at the sides. And you'll make up for that when you get to the end. You'll see that you have to kind of spread them apart a little bit. All right. Push those over. Might have to separate them a little bit to get them to slide. And as you can see, this one popped out, so you just put it back in again between the 2. Bring around the handle, the side of the handle. Popping. It's narrow in there, so my fingers are pulling them out as I try to capture them. I just want to show you what happens when you get to the end and how you can, when you go to put a new piece on because you've run out, you always want to start so you're coming from the inside of the handle. You don't want to be on the outside of the handle. And if I get to one here, I'll show you what I mean by that. So here's what I mean by that. If you look, I'm going under the handle before I bring it back over again. Now I've got to make sure that I have enough to go back and forth because I have to end underneath. And I believe I have enough to go back and forth. If you know you're only going to get to the other side and not the other way, go ahead and cut it off and go ahead and splice it. But basically what you do is you just take another piece, you just take it back about 4 ribs and just re-weave on top of the re that you cut it off at the edge, and then you re-weave on that one. As soon as I get back, I'll show you how to do that. Sorry, went out of the picture. This one right here is the one that likes to pop every time I try to make it go. All right, so this should be my last row because I'm gonna end up, see here I go on top of the rim, and you don't want to, the sides, you don't want to do that. So it's only when you come underneath it. So when I get back to the other side, I'm going to be ready to splice it. You want to make it kind of come tight along the side piece so it doesn't have any gappy loose spots. It does get easier and easier as you get more to the middle because you have a little bit wider space to put your fingers in, but then it starts to close up. The middle seems to have less space than the sides, so it makes it a little tricky. I love continual weave. It's, you know, you just keep going until you run out. So here I am. All right, so I know that this is not going to be long enough to go back and come back again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this so it's right level with the top of that handle. So inside here, I've just cut it off right there. Okay. Now I'm not, let me see. There we go. And I take another piece, and what I do is I kind of know that I'm going to go right on top of what I've already done. And I'm going to do 4 spokes, and I just go ahead and reweave it down about 4 from the counting the rim, and I just slide it. It's going to be hard for me to show you this. I just slide it right on top of what I just did. Sometimes you have to move things out of the way. It's going to go under this one. So I just slid it right on top. And now you really can't see that, right, except for that being cut right there, you really can't see that that's what I have done. Okay, so you put it right on top of what you already did, and then you just continue weaving. Over, under, and you just keep going. So I'm gonna stop there. Just shows you how to join it. And then I need to go to the other side and start working on that side so I can get my 4 in and then pop in my secondary spokes. But that's how you start a new piece. You just go right on top of what you've already done and just keep on weaving.